Well, good morning.
Good morning.
As you can see, we have no PowerPoint, no computer today, because I'm not doing a sermon. And you know, believe it or not, doing a testimony is harder by far than doing a sermon. I've shared my testimony in the 12-step program, recovery rooms, all from one end of Ontario to the other, and even into the U.S. And but this is different. Sharing your testimony is about a testimony about what God's done in your life, right? And yeah, I'm just stalling. Also, part of Recovery Church Institute Theology School is each of us have to do a testimony as our final project. And apparently I'm ahead of the game. But yeah. So here we go. Father, I just thank you. I pray that you would just anoint my words today, Lord, and let this be all about you for your glory, your praise, and your mercy in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
I start my story the same as I do in the rooms because it has everything to do with my journey throughout addiction. So I have no memory prior to the age of 8 at all, blank slate, never gone there. And I actually had a top psychologist tell me it probably wasn't a good idea to press through because whatever's back there before the age of 8 could set me into a psych ward for life. And so I was really grateful to her that I never pressed that area in my life. I was sexually molested until the age of 14 and gang raped at 13. And if you want more details, you can buy my book. I actually wrote this book because I really got tired of telling my story over and over and over because it's hard. It's challenging. My story involves a lot of trauma. You know, I started drinking, and at the age of 13, I can remember it was like yesterday. We used to live on a farm back home, and we had a big party outside. My parents did, and I guess one of my dad's friends thought it'd be funny to give me a rye and Coke at 13, and it burned all the way down and all the way up. My mom wasn't too impressed because it was right in front of the food table. So, yeah. But that would start my kind of entry into drinking and drugs. There is an addiction out there that I haven't had except gambling. I don't know why, probably because I was too cheap to spend money that I could spend on my dope. You know, I remember giving my heart to the Lord when I was 9 years old. I can remember that although I wasn't raised in a church, Mom and Dad thought it'd be nice if me and my sister went to Sunday school. So we attended Temple Baptist back home for about 5 years. And the only reason I remember that is because I have my little red Bible and I wrote my salvation date in this Bible. You know, I always thought that God kind of abandoned me, but I know today that, you know, He's not going to abandon me. He's not going to forsake me. And basically what happened was I turned my back on God because I found my new passion, my newfound lover in life, and that was drugs and alcohol. So I would spend the next many, many years engulfed in addiction of all kinds. You know, I had workaholism. I probably still do a little bit. I had a shopping addiction. I had a food addiction. I had sex and love addiction. All of it. As a child, I can remember thinking if I just had the right man, the white picket fence, a little farm, then everything would be good. And that was honestly the innocence of a child and what I thought I wanted to grow up. Suicides were a huge part of my active addiction story. Can't tell you how many times I did. But I do remember at 17, I tried to drown myself in a friend's pool. I had to be resuscitated, and I ended up in the hospital. And that's the first time that I let my mother know what had happened. And she had said that I was always a child with a wild imagination. At 30, moving forward a little bit, I remember I wanted to confront my abuser. And, you know, it was met with another harsh blow when it was like, baby, you wanted it. And so these were just some of the trauma issues that I dealt with. I also had before, it's often said that Satan tries to take us in our infancy, right? And before the age of 5, I had a near-death experience. Apparently I just walked right off the edge of a dock and went down 30 feet, took my dad 3 times to try and save my life. We also had 2 near-death experiences in car accidents. Ironically, one of them was hit by a drunk driver. The other one was an ice storm. Needless to say, I don't like driving in the winter. And so all of these things combined really left me feeling just empty and purposeless, and I didn't know where I belonged, where I fit. I thought it was in a family system, but I just attracted what I was, right? Yeah, so 2013, got into drinking and drugging, partying, you know, and then moving forward, I would meet my first serious relationship, the father of my daughter's father. Man, this is hard. So easy to stand up here and just teach. Also knowing that it's live, because I don't usually do it live. Yeah, so anyways, I met him in a bar, not surprisingly. I was still heavy into my addiction. And I had run away from home many, many times, and this was one of them, and I just wanted to get out of the house, right? And so I ended up meeting this guy in a bar, and I got pregnant, and I didn't know I was pregnant. And I had a lot of amends to do because I was still using the drug of choice when I was pregnant, although I stopped as soon as I found out. But that would take us on a geographical cure. That took us on a trek out to Vancouver. My daughter was born in East Van and loved it out there, except this man turned out to be very violent. And I would fly home 2 months after she was born on an emergency flight back to Ontario. And that would start yet another journey alone and trying to raise a child on my own. When I got back, however, I found out that I was pregnant again. And yeah, some people close to me in my life said I could barely handle and manage the child that I have. So they encouraged me to have an abortion, and I did. I don't say that often. I don't talk about it often because it was really hard decision to make. And I know that that's a sin, but I didn't know any better back then. I did the best that I could with what I had at the time. And I actually was able to, because dissociation was a big part of my coping skills, and I learned how to dissociate and looking out windows and so on. And so I just turned the switch off. I just turned the switch off, and I did not revisit that decision for 11 years. And I'll talk about that in a bit. I would then go on to meet my first husband, and he was a musician and played all throughout the province and sounded just like Creed. And I thought I had, you know, died and gone to heaven and met my, you know, happily ever after. And that didn't turn out to be so. I'm very grateful to this man because it was through him that I got to know about Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. But I went from the frying pan into the fire. He was extremely violent, and I had near-death experiences a few times. And, you know, that was part and parcel of his addiction, right? Because he was one of us. But out of that marriage for 12 years came my son, whom many of you know and have met. And my kids have been my lifeline my whole life. Like, I would take a bullet for my kids, I would die for my kids, but I also had a lot of guilt and shame because of the choices that I made, and there is a biological component to, a genetic component to this disease, and you know, they both ended up struggling in their own, but that's their story to tell. I can share, though, that my son today, my daughter is clean and sober today through the grace of God, and she actually was baptized, and she's doing wonderful today. My son took a little bit longer. I remember when I was pregnant, I was 2 weeks overdue. He just didn't want to come out. But anyways, he's coming up on a year, clean and sober, and that is 15 years of prayer for my son. And I'm very proud of him today. We're very proud of him. So I have my kids, and I'm in this first marriage, and that took me into a world of crime. That marriage opened the doors for a lot of criminal activity, stuff that I didn't talk about for a long time, because you know the rules. You're not supposed to, right? And but I wasn't one of these girly girl, prissy girls talking about the house that blank drug built and all this kind of stuff. I was in the trenches. See, I also struggled with a bit of an identity issue. Like, I always, for some reason, thought my dad wanted a boy, and so maybe I should have just been a tomboy, and I was. But it took me into places and things that I should have been doing 25 to life. But I thought I was an intelligent alcoholic and addict, and I escaped the inevitables, right? But I was a business sense. I had steel walls, 12-foot steel walls that I built around me, and I wasn't afraid of much of anything. And I dealt with rage. I'm not talking anger, I'm talking rage. And I spent 2 years going up to a place in Orangeville to see this doctor and deal with my rage. And it turned out to be a lot of imploded trauma, right? So I always, when I'm working with addicts, I always work from a trauma-informed care perspective because of that, because I get it, I know, right? Anyway, so that marriage lasted 12 years. After one final devastating domestic violence situation, I said, me or the booze, that's it, right? And so he went off to a center in Toronto, and this was the first time that I really discovered and learned that I too had a drinking and drug problem. He was in treatment somewhere, and I was somewhere, I don't even know where I was. I was in a blackout, because that's a big part of my story as well. And I had promoted myself to vodka by this time, because vodka doesn't smell, and that's a crock because it's pure alcohol. But anyways, I had a 40-ouncer between my legs. I called the treatment center and demanded to speak to my husband at the time, and of course they wouldn't let me. But then I thought, well, if he's going to do this, maybe I'll be nice and stop. And so I did. I stopped for 6 years, but because of his career, he was a musician, and I managed the band, I still engaged in my drugs of choice. I gave up alcohol, but still engaged in my drugs of choice, because I had to have something to cope with all these drunks that were in the bars we were going to, right? So anyways, we carried on, and 6 years in, somebody said something in one of the rooms of the 12-step program that pissed me off, and I never went back. We thought we could do it our way. I never felt that I had a problem with marijuana, but today I know that that's a gateway drug for me, for this girl, because that's what took me out. And when I went back out after 6 years, we were separated at the time, and I had gotten an apartment, and I was just, Sarah McLaughlin was my only friend. I would dance in the living room by myself, and my sister had said something to me once. She said, you're not an alcoholic. Why do you keep calling yourself an alcoholic? You're just a happy drunk. He was the alcoholic. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. So I'm sitting in my new apartment. He's at home with the kids, and I had a red glass of wine, because that was one of my favorite drinks, right? And I thought it was quite classy at the time. Yeah, right. Anyways, I had this glass of red wine. It took me half an hour to make a decision to pick up that drink. And at this point, I was with his drummer, by the way, because promiscuity was one of my defects, okay? And finally, it was just this voice in my head that said, just drink it, for crying out loud. You're not an alcoholic, remember? And I did. And I'd like to say that I just imploded into my addiction again, but that wasn't the case for me. It was about 2 months. I could take it, I could leave it. Didn't bother me. But by the end of that 2 months, I was a chemist. I had promoted myself to a chemist because I knew exactly what to take and when to take it to fluctuate my life so I could stay clean or drunk and high until the kids went to bed. You know, I'd like to say that I just didn't have any wreckage or damage, but we all know that's not true. You know, I did things like, I had a business at the time, and I did things like take a brand new F-150, drive it all the way to Toronto and back in a total blackout with my kids in the back seat to pick up a guy. And I have no recollection of it at all. None. I would do things like leave my kids at home when they were little and drive my car to the local dive bar and sit there at the bar judging everybody else while my babies were at home sleeping. And in the morning I'd wake up and there'd be burn holes in my carpet and Sarah McLachlan was playing. You know? So there was a lot of shame and guilt that I carried for a long time. When I was a little girl, I can remember going through the trauma and abuse, and because we were in a farm, I would often navigate out into nature, and I can remember this little creek one time, you know, and I would sit there by myself and throw pebbles into the water and watch the ripple effect in life. And I found great solace in nature, and it was part of the thing that helped me in my spiritual journey when I finally got clean and sober for good. You see, I knew that there was something out there greater than me, but I wasn't really sure what that was at the time. But it gave me a sense of peace, right? The peace that transcended understanding, and I knew that I wasn't alone. See, in my childhood home, we had like these little cubbies. It was an old home. And I could often be found crawling in through the closet back in these attic crawl spaces that only a child could fit in. And sitting there with my stuffed animals and my imaginary friends and talking. Right? Because I just wanted to be safe. You know, in Recovery Church Institute, we're going through schooling right now. And you know how it says lack of power was our dilemma in the big book? Well, they use an acronym LOL. Not laugh out loud, but lack of love. That was our dilemma. And see, I searched for a family most of my life. Even though I had one, and my parents did the best that they could with what they had, all I ever wanted was to belong somewhere, because I didn't feel like I could. My sister and I were very estranged. We had 5 years difference. We were very different. And I just couldn't understand. I would, you know, go to friends' homes and see their lives and just think, what's wrong with me, God? Why can't I have this? I don't understand. You know? And I just wanted somebody to love me. And I didn't feel loved. All I felt was the wrath of a man's rage and abuse. And I'm not saying this to have a sad story, because I definitely had a part in all of this. Because see, I changed my mindset somewhere along the line. And I said, yeah, you guys are going to take from me what's in it for me. And I would do anything, including sell my body, to get my next fix. I'll be in control, thank you. And that's how I lived my life for a long time. You know, I came so close to doing so many things. And through the grace of God, He was always there steering me out. You see, one time I used to have a really close friend, and she was in the dancing world, and we were going to go to Barrie, and she said I'd make lots of money because I had dark hair, naturally. This isn't natural. But I had dark hair, and I couldn't do it. Because intuitively I knew that if any man touched me the wrong way, I'd kill them. Remember, I had already committed murder from my perspective, that I would kill them. And so I didn't go. I remember working on the streets in Hamilton, and I worked with a lot of the girls in human trafficking and stuff, and I went to this one girl to meet with her on a client appointment, and I said to God, I really don't know how I can help this girl, because I've never done this. And I heard an audible voice say, you have, you just didn't get paid for it. Wow. This is what God was doing all throughout my active addiction. It's what he was doing when I was 5 years old, 3 years old. Right? So there's a dark force in the world, but there's also mighty angels standing guard around us. There's also a God that walks before me and behind me and covers my back. And I used to always say when I got into recovery that I didn't go through everything I went through for nothing. It had to count for something. And that is why we do what we do. It has to count for something. My life matters to God. And I am not a mistake, and neither are you. I had a different kind of church experience. I just didn't feel like I fit. Everybody's happy and their families and the little kids in their beautiful dresses are dancing around, and I'm going on Easter Sunday with no family wanting to pick up a chair and throw it at people. What Christian does that? I did. The criminal world also led me into clubs, in and around clubs, and it led me to a false delusion that this was a family, that this was brotherly love, that they were going to take care of me. And I belonged, and I thought again, I belong, and I'm home. But I met a really good friend who's now passed, and we had many, many talks. And this is a man that had 666 tattooed on his head. And by the grace of God, by me just talking in a language that God gave me to talk to, he ended up sending me emails and Christian emails. Where's God in this, Wendy? Come again? And when I was clean and sober and I had got my first house, this same man, I came to a place because I was still a single mom where I was a few $1,000s short because I thought I could get the first-time homeowners discount. But apparently when you're living in the marital home that somebody else owns, that doesn't count. So I was short. So I went to this man. I said, hey man, can I just do a few more runs in drug world? Because I'm short. And I'll be eternally grateful to that man because he said no. Wendy, you're not going back. And in many ways, he used to think I was his girlfriend, but he was not my boyfriend. But in many ways, he became a really close, dear friend. So that gives you a little bit of the background, what happened, what happened. But I always knew that God was with me. I don't know how really, but it was a knowing deep in my heart, right? And moving forward, so I buy my first house. My parents lent me the money for a down payment, and I paid them back to the dime. Because see, I still had that mentality that I don't owe anybody anything, right? And I can do it myself. Miss Independent. By this time I had, I thought if I had enough education, if I had enough money, it was all worldly voids. I love Gabor Mate, who's a leading expert in addiction in Canada, and he says it's not why the addiction, but why the pain. You see, we have this void that we're trying to fill with all these things in the world. And it never, ever, ever sustains anything. I never lost anybody up until this point of any, great significance in my family. I bought this house. I was working at a college in the GTA, training others to be addiction counselors. And it was a long commute, and I worked 14-hour days, commuted 3 hours all year round. And I loved it. I loved this job. I was designed the curriculum. I was faculty head, and I thought, I'm going to retire. I'm just going to retire from this job. It's going to be great. I only work 8 to 12, Monday to Friday, And that slowly came to an end. I was there for about 10 years, and then there was just a lot of stuff going on in the field of education at that time. And I got a transfer, actually, to Kitchener finally, so that I'd be closer to home, because I couldn't handle the commute anymore. Remember, I had that accident as a child, and I was afraid to drive in the winter. And anyways, so I ended up working at the Kitchener campus, and then they closed the program at that campus, and now I'm unemployed. And that was back in 2016. And I was devastated. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to support myself or the kids or anything, because I made pretty decent money back then. And I remember that I went back to school at that time. See, I started to do my theology degree years before that, back in 2003, but it just wasn't time. And so in 2016, the Lord took me for 2 years going back and getting my bachelor's and my degrees in theology. And I like to say, because by this time Dale was a part of my story, and I'll backtrack a little bit, but I like to say that, I just decided and it was so easy and done. No. If it wasn't for Dale, I would have never written this book, finished this book, and I would have never gone to theology school. Because he believed in me, he encouraged me. And, the funny thing is, every paper that I wrote, every thesis that I wrote while in school, always somehow had something to do with addiction and a cup of suffering. I'm like, really, God? I don't want this cup of suffering. Jesus already did that for me, right? But I get it now when I fast track. I get it. When that marriage ended, like I said, I had my house, I had all this, and somebody had mentioned this weird thing to me, like I might have a sex and love addiction. I'm like, whatever, get out of here, right? But as it came to pass, I learned that I did. I had a love addiction, remember, lack of love. I just wanted attention. I wanted somebody to love me unconditionally and not abuse me. That's what I wanted. And I signed up for POF and all these other sites, and I was like getting high. Because these emails would come in and be like, ooh, look at me, I'm getting attention. Look at all this attention I'm getting. Right? And I go on dates. Sometimes I had 3 dates in one day. And my kids are going, what are you doing? Oh, it's just a friend. Yeah, right. Friend. But this grew tiresome on me. And I ended up with a very like-minded guy that ran with the world I used to run with. And I had a scare of my life. I thought I had contracted some horrible disease. And I had to go on some pretty heavy medication for a term while they waited for the results. And I didn't. Through the grace of God, I did not. But that was the end of my sex and love addiction. I shut it down. Because I came to realize that the only person that could fill this place in my heart was God himself. And I had given everybody else that place in my heart that was meant for him. I love the little Facebook mime that says, a girl should be so close to God that the man has to go through God to get to her. Love it. So I shut everything down, and I was on my own for 6 years. So, as my son would say, well, yeah, right, Mom. I dated people, okay, but I did not live with anybody. I needed to learn what it was like to be on my own and enlarge my spiritual life. Because in March of 2000 was my last drink and drug. And I ended up going in handcuffs in a van up to the Homewood in Guelph. And I was close to being locked in the rubber room, because apparently I had an attitude, right? And I'd like to say that I stayed clean and sober by getting into the rooms of 12 AA and doing all the steps and all that. But my big book was used as a window holder for 10 years. I ran smoothly on the grace of God. I was sick. I fought everything in my life. And so I'm still working at the college. I'm living in this first house that I bought. Ended up becoming a sober living environment because it helped me pay the rent, to be honest. But I also wanted to be surrounded by people that were clean and sober. And my kids were there at the time. And I had met this sponsor, Rick from the Bad Boys in Mississauga. Oh my God, what a case. He's passed now, God rest his soul. But I knew that I needed somebody like him because I didn't have any desire to drink and drug again, but there was a switch that was going off in my head. And so I needed him to help me with that other piece that connected to the criminal world. And that's why I had him for about 5 years. When the big book came alive for me was, I was in my second marriage, because I had a few. And I remember being in recovery and meeting this guy who was from California. And the guys that took him through the big book used to hang out with Bill W. So the message that I got was pure. And that was really what awakened my spirit to the 12-step recovery, because he taught me like I've never been taught before. Fast forward, then I have Rick. He took me through a sex and love inventory that I have never seen anybody do, ever. And I love that I can pass that on to the girls that I sponsor. And so I'm carrying along my life, things are good, right? And then I asked Rick, do you think I could get a Harley again? Because backtrack, he told me that he thought I should sell my Harley. And I said, are you brain damaged? That's my therapy. But I did. Because see, back then, old school 12-step recovery, you take the cotton out of your ears and you put it in your mouth, you shut up and you do what you're told. Or you die. That's your choice. So that's the hardcore recovery circles that I grew up in, right? Not this watered down stuff, I'm sorry, but that's my truth, right? The book is what I go through. And now we have a fat book that we go through, which connects the 12-step program and the Bible and cross-reference everything. It's beautiful. So that brings me up to Dale, when I met Dale. And by this time, I have a Harley. My sponsor said I could get a new bike. And he says, I could start dating again. He suggested it might be okay. He says, you got your list? I went, yeah, I got my list. See, after the sex inventory, you're supposed to talk about your old ideals and your new ideals. What do you value in a relationship? What are you looking for in a partner? Right? So now I had this list of 17 things. And I would go on these dates, come home, well, what do you think? Got your list? How many's on the list? I said, I don't know. Okay, next. Right? But I met Dale. And I had shut down all the old doors that were open towards sex and love adventures. And, Dale had a mutual friend on Facebook. And so we ended up talking online and stuff. And then he says, you want to go to... No, I said, I'm looking for some friends to ride with, some clean and sober friends, because he was part of Sober Sons at that time. And he sends me this message, and it says, Sober Sis. I went, are you kidding me? Seriously? Don't you know who I ride with? And I just lost it. Well, apparently he liked my fire. And then he asked me out, and I said, he goes, you want to go to 40-area swap meet? And I said, okay, that was our first date, right? That's a cool date. Anyways, we went to the 40-area swap meet. We met at a local Tim Hortons because I thought, well, what if I don't like him? What if he's too short? What if he's, not my type, right? And so I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, yeah, this is probably a no-go.
All judgment.
Yeah, all judgment, right? Anyways, so he pulls up and I'm looking in my mirror in the car and I'm like, oh, he's not too bad actually. And then we talked for a bit and he goes, well, do you want to go or not? And I said, well, where's all your friends that were supposed to come? And he still claims they all backed out, but I think he was just being a little fibber, right? But anyways, I was supposed to be redoing a fence in my yard at the time, and it was not calling for rain at all. And I said, well, if it doesn't rain, then I'll go. And I get a text in the morning saying it's not raining. So we go down to 40-area swap meet, and really the rest is history. We spent the next 30 days together. But here's the thing. We both agreed that we wanted to do it right this time. And biblically right. And so we had no premarital sex. We agreed to that. And let me tell you, I get it now. I get it why God says not to do that. Because we would have never endured the trials together that came if we hadn't done that. Now, mind you, we were married in 30 days, but it's still something, right? It's still something. And, Dale and I have gone through, I can't even tell you. In 2013, my mom passed. Then my granddaughter passed. That was that London fatal trauma down in London, at Costco, where that little girl was killed. That was my granddaughter. And I just had a slew of about 9 or 10 deaths that went one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. One of them was my kid's father, died from this disease. My uncle, my grandfather, who was my spiritual, I just loved Gramps, and I just couldn't fathom it. And so I'd actually, back in the grief share, I had moved to London and, then to Woodstock, and then thank God I kept my home and I came back home. That's just another piece for another day. But we met, and Dale and I did everything together, and we still do. He treated me, and still does, with kindness and a gentleman. He still opens doors for me. He's been a solid father figure for my kids, my grandkids. He's comforted me through all my grief and loss. And now bringing it current, what is my purpose and where is like today? If you had told me 10 years ago, and this is in recovery, that I'd be standing here pastoring a church, I would have told you you were brain damage and relapsed on coke. This was not my plan. And let me tell you something more serious though. This is a calling. If you don't feel God calling you to this, don't even go there. Because it's not easy. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to quit. This is not what I would have chosen to do. But we started this venture. I had gone through school and that. Backtracking, I worked at an amazing church downtown for 2 years, and some of you know that. And but the contract ran out, and there was just situations they couldn't keep 2 pastors on. And I went and applied to a lot of jobs to become a pastor at their church, and the doors were shut because I'm a woman. So Dale, being my biggest supporter, said, I really think we're supposed to do this. And I was crying, weeping, saying, I don't know, Dale, I don't think I'm ready. I don't know if I want to do this. This is too much. And I knew God was prompting him to do it because I've never seen him stand up to me in such boldness. And he goes, no, we got to do this. I said, okay, I'll tell you one thing though. I'm not having nothing to do with the legal component of this because I don't want to go there. That's your field. You do it. He said, okay. And here we are coming up on a year. And there's a lot of beautiful churches throughout this county and around the world. But this is our little humble abode. Right? And as long as one or more are present, God is here. We partnered recently with Recovery Church Movement. And man, oh man, the pieces just started to fall into place. And I'm just like, I get it. I really get it now. Because see, a long time ago, I was wanting to write a fat book. And I started the task and I went, oh, I'm not doing this. So when I got a copy of the fat book in my hand, I went, yes! Right? Because they did all the work for me. What it's like today, God is number one in our lives. Number one. I'm not saying it's perfect, like, I don't have my battles like David with God. I'm not saying that at all. Boy, we wrestle. But we have God in the center of our marriage. We have God in our family. God is our whole life, our whole world today. God has restored and redeemed both of us from the pits of hell. He keeps my ego in check all the time because I know what it's like to rest on my laurels, jump into my ego, reconstruct my ego, and go back out. Been there, done it, wrote the book on it. Not going there again. I've had really good sponsors in my life, really good, and I still have a beautiful sponsor today. I wasn't ready for female sponsors for years, right? Because I had an issue with blondes. I wanted to knock you all out. Right? Because you were the ones that slept with my old man. Husband, sorry. Not him. Prior. Right? Today, we pastor a small church. God is the core of my life. I sponsor girls. I love recovery. I love what I do. It's not easy. But I have God's restored a family around me. I have a good relationship with my sister today. We just lost our father, so yes, that song, Orphan Girl, was very hard to listen to. He passed in January, and it kind of feels like, I don't know, a little bit lost when you lose both your parents. It's hard to explain. I miss Dad big time. I don't think I really ever had a chance to grieve because it was Christmas, season. And so I think part of what God's showing me is this is my time to reset. This is my time to grieve my father. This is my time to just rest in him. And he's taken me deeper. And he's taken Dale deeper. And but look out, September. Look out. That's what I sense. I love the people in these rooms. I love the people that watch online. I love Recovery Church Institute. They're taking me deeper, But I'm so grateful. If you're missing joy and you're missing love and you're missing happiness in your life, you're not finding enough gratitude. Right? It's just an honor and a privilege to be a recovered alcoholic drug addict. Absolutely, I would never change it. Money could not change it for me. Because I wouldn't have this, and I wouldn't have each of you. Thank you, and God bless.